Okay, everybody. So yesterday when we started remote learning, I told you guys that we'd be doing attendance, which you knew already. I also told you that everything you needed to know would be on this main page of my website, this post Happy New Year. This is not on our class page, but this is on just the main page of the Mr. Walks website. Okay, and I'm just going to do one quick attendance change while that's happening. Okay. So if you're having trouble getting to the Teams meeting, and I know one of my other classes this morning was having trouble, I'm going to recommend that you just use this link that's just going to be there all week to get to the Teams meeting. I think that's the best way to get in there. I know that for some of you, you like to use the calendar. If that works for you, great, but that Teams meeting link is just always going to be there to connect you to the Teams meeting. So in one quick attendance check, I think other than Kyle, everybody is here. Oh, and Logan. Let me just check for Logan. Did I miss Logan? Nope, and Logan. So just Kyle and Logan. Only two that I'm missing. Okay, everybody else has been marked present now. All right. So as I was saying, this thing right on the front page here is got the link to the Teams meeting right there. Also, yesterday's class I recorded, as I said I would, and the recording is now linked here as well. So if you missed something from yesterday and you want to review it, that's the place where you can get at that right there. And another beep. And there we go. Okay, so right on that main page will be the place where you can get at the recording of yesterday's class. And you'll even notice I have a spot here for today's class, which I've already started recording. So after this class today, I will connect that in there so you can connect to that as well. And this is what I would recommend is the place where you can get to the Teams meeting every day at this time to make sure you're on time for class. Okay, finally as well, remember there's also the extra help time. I'm actually not sure if it's happening today because we also have a staff meeting today, but in general, that's going to be the extra help time that's available for you guys should you need to connect to it, okay? Now, in addition to this main page of my website, the main page, we also have our regular page that we've been using all year. And whew, one more attendance. I think that should be it. That should be everybody now. I don't think there's anybody else that I've missed that is not in Teams. So that's awesome. You guys are all here. That's really good. Okay, so you're all here. You're all present. And now, as you can see, the main page has links to all the Teams information you need. And our regular page still has links to all the stuff you need for the course. So if you're still working on assignments and stuff. And even more importantly, if you're working on this example that I started yesterday, I'm going to be working on all week. If you're having trouble keeping up with the code, I mentioned this yesterday, right from our main page, if you go to examples, and then scroll down examples to this here, optional examples. Here is a link to all the code that I typed in yesterday. So if you're having bugs in your code or you had trouble keeping up or you didn't have time to type in the comments that I put in the code, you could easily click that and get right to this code. And right here, for example, when I went over timers yesterday, you could get all that comments. You could get the code, you could get whatever you need to put into your example. And if that's not happening this week because you're having technical trouble setting up Visual Studio at home this week, this could also happen next week when you're here at school. Now, remember, you don't need these examples as part of your mark. The examples aren't for marks. But when you get back next week, you guys are going to work on your final projects. And those are for marks. And actually, I'd like to remind you, just going to go to the week 1 events of this course and open up the course outline from way back in September when this course first started, right? And you looked at this and all that, how that all kind of laid out, that the final project is actually worth 30% of your final grade in this course. That's why you've had this whole month to kind of think about it and plan for it. So, and normally, although that might be panicking some of you, this is a really good thing. The final project is something you can, it's not really like a test. It's something you can develop over that time and kind of demonstrate your learning. A lot of students will find it will definitely raise their mark. So the stuff I've been doing this week in terms of these programming extras could be directly applied to that final project. And again, if you're not able to follow along at home because of whatever technical reason, then as I've just shown, you can also use the code and the videos next week to also incorporate this into your final project. What was I going to say? Yeah. So that's all there. And what I hope to do this week is I'm going to be doing this extra example 1 and 2. There are more on my website other than those 2, but we're not going to have really time to do other than those first 2 over the course of this week. Maybe we could do a bit of them, but they're also there for you, even if you want to get it even more ahead or more advanced in terms of what you're doing there. Now, I also realize that when you guys get back next week, some of you are going to also be playing a little bit of catch up on some of the units that, you know, you might still be behind on, but don't sacrifice catching up for the final project. As you saw how much it's worth, that wouldn't be a smart thing to do, but we'll talk about all of that next week as we sort of come together again to kind of finalize how this course is going to wrap up. Okay, taking a sip of coffee and pausing for a second. Does anyone have any questions about this at this point? I didn't think so, but if you do, you're welcome to put your microphone on and ask questions during class today. If you don't want to do that, you'd rather email me or meet with me during the extra help time, you certainly can do that as well. Okay, whatever works best for you to get the support you need. Okay, so let's go back to where we were yesterday. And actually, let's just run it to see what we did yesterday. So yesterday we designed a form that would use a timer to flash colors. Then the timer would also be used, a second timer, to switch from one form over to another form. So there was 2 new concepts used in this example. One is timers, which you haven't seen before, and the other is now multiple forms, more than one form. Okay? And those are concepts that aren't formally stuff that I tested you on in this class. They're nothing that you had any assignments on in this class, and they're not required in your final project. However, if you do put some of that extra stuff into your final project, you will be credited for it, right? So it's not a requirement, but it absolutely can give you credit. So what we did yesterday is something you could easily incorporate into any final project, a little welcome screen with flashing colors, and then it jumps over to your actual project. That's easily something any one of you could do, and it would count 4 marks moving forward. Okay, so that's what we did. In terms of code, okay, so there's the 2 timers, things that we did there. And if I open up the Solution Explorer, you can see that we have just one form, but 2 forms. And also up here on the tabs, you can see more than one form up here on the tabs, okay? If you missed any of that from yesterday, or you want to review how I did all that, then I would definitely say go back to the main page, go back to the recording of yesterday's class, and you can go through it at your own pace, either at home this week or even next week or the weeks after as you finish up this class. And you may not need all of it, but you might need some of it. All right, so today we're going to work on Form 2. Okay, Form 1 is done. It's all done. Today we're going to work on Form 2, and I'm going to open up the toolbox. In addition to the toolbox, I'm going to also open up the properties window. So I can get at some properties. And now that we're getting a little more advanced, I'm also going to open up the Solution Explorer. Something that we didn't need for most of this course, but now that we're working in multiple forms, it might not be a bad idea to have this thing called the Solution Explorer open. Okay, it can be smaller. You can sort of, adjust things so it's not as big, but you might need it, right? The properties window, the toolbox, and the Solution Explorer. All right, now here's what we're going to do next. Yesterday, when we used the toolbox, I said to you that when we used a timer, it wasn't in common controls. You either had to go to all Windows forms or you had to search the toolbox to find the timer. But here's the thing about the toolbox. What you see in the toolbox there isn't all that's available to you. There's more things you can add to that toolbox because this Visual Studio is for professional software developers. So they add things to it all the time. So in order to do what I want to do next with you guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to the word general at the bottom of the toolbox, and I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to right click on general, and I'm going to go to choose items. This will allow me to add items onto my toolbox. And the thing I want to use today isn't in the toolbox. I'm going to add it in there. Right click, choose items. Now it's going to take a second to get this all ready. And then up pops this little dialog box, allowing you to choose various things. And they're separated into tabs to sort of organize them. Obviously, some of these are really advanced. They're for really advanced programmers beyond me, beyond you, beyond everybody. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the one that says COM components. COM just means common components. Okay? And you can see right away there's stuff like an Adobe Acrobat reader, right? A PDF reader and stuff like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom. Okay? So let me back up and do that one more time. From the toolbox, I'm going to right click on general. I'm going to go to choose items. I'm going to click on COM components, common components. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom where I'm going to find Windows Media Player. And as you probably know, a Windows Media Player can play both sounds and videos. That's perfect. That's all I need. So I'm going to check this off. Windows Media Player under COM components. And then I'm going to click OK. You will now notice under General, a new tool has been added. Excuse me. And I can take that tool and I can add it to Form 2, which is what I'm doing right now. Now, this is going to take a minute. It's a little more complicated than just adding a label. So, you know, you can expect things to maybe have a little spinning circle a little bit, but there it is. I can actually embed right into my program a version of Windows Media Player, which is, I think, pretty cool if you think about it. So there it is. There's the Windows Media Player. Okay, now everything else we're going to do here is stuff we've done before. We're going to add some buttons. So buttons you can just find under common control. So I'm going to add a button. Okay, and for these buttons, okay, I'm just going to, oh, what's going on here? Someone going in and out of the meeting. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on there with one of you, but okay, so on this button, I'm going to change one of its text properties. To speed up our process today, I'm actually not even going to bother naming anything in this design today. I'm just going to have all my stuff, okay? So I got a button, I got a design. Let me make this a little bit wider. This button a little bit wider, okay? And I'm going to make, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 buttons. So here's one button, 2 buttons, 3 buttons, 4 buttons, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 buttons. Okay. 7 buttons on my design and my media player. Okay. Just cleaning that up a little bit tighter. Okay. And now I'm just going to go and change a bunch of properties. Okay. So I use the toolbox to add both a button, which is something we've done since back in Unit 2, but obviously this is a new thing to add on there. Now you might be thinking, well, what good is this media player? Well, it's great. You're gonna see you actually only have to write 1 or 2 lines of code. Very simple, no if statements, no loops, nothing fancy like that. But just 1 or 2 simple lines of code to essentially play sounds and play videos. And if you think about what you're gonna do in a final project, that could be really cool. Okay, let's go ahead and change some of the properties of these various buttons. And all I'm going to change is the text properties. Okay, so the text of button 1 is going to say play a sound from a file. Okay, the next button is going to play a video from a file. Okay, so play a sound from a file, play a video from a file. I should keep that. I'm going to have one that says hide player. So hide the player, like this player that's sitting right here. I could hide it so I don't see it. And you are actually already probably can predict what that code is. But if you think about it, a media player can play sounds without being seen, right? So that would be something interesting to do there. And then obviously I want to show it again. So show player. And then my next button is going to be controls on and controls off. I mentioned this yesterday. What if in your final project you decide you'd like to do a little cut screen video? Some really cool video that you make to introduce a game. Well, if you did that, you wouldn't necessarily want people using your game to see the little play and scroll controls. They would just want to be immersed in the big video. So you could play the video without giving them the controls to control it. So that's what these two buttons are going to do. They're going to turn those controls on and off. Okay, and then finally the last button is just an exit button. All right. Those are the buttons and the media player. I'm also going to change a couple properties of the form itself. So instead of just calling it form 2, I'm going to call it the Walks media player. That's going to be the text. And I'm going to do something with the form border style. Sorry, I'm going to change a property here called control box, which is set to true. I'm going to set it to false. By setting control box to false, there's no more little X right here. There's no more minimize, maximize button there. Okay, in order to exit this program, you now need to use my button. So my button decides how you exit. I don't give them the button to do that anymore. Okay, and lastly, I'm going to set the startup position to be in the center of the screen. This is something we did yesterday as well. And I'm just going to run this to see how it works so far. So I got my little splash screen, my little color display. After 3 seconds, it's going to jump over to my media player. And there it is, right? So here's my media player. I have no way to exit it right now because I haven't coded any of these buttons. But there it is. There's my media player. So I'll hit stop and we can go from there. All right. So now that I have that code in there, let's go and code some of the easy stuff we already know how to do. For example, the exit button. You guys have been coding exit buttons for a while now. So this shouldn't be a big deal, okay, to add an exit button. Notice I didn't bother naming the button, so it's just going to say button 7. So you got to be careful about that. That is nothing I would recommend for a final project, but since this is an example, we'll keep it really simple, okay? So it's application dot exit. You knew that already. That's how you can exit a program, okay? And that one, a lot of you also did the code this dot close. That code also works, but now here's where this code, I want to put a little comment about that code. The code above only closes the current form, okay? Means the rest of the program will be running. By the rest of the program, it could mean other forms will be running, okay? But this line shuts down all forms. So it shuts down everything, okay? That's the difference between those two lines, okay? This .close is useful when you just want to shut off one form, but application.exit shuts down all your forms. So why would that be useful? Well, now that you know about multiple forms, and if we go back to form 1, and you might remember this is how we got to form 2, was these 2 lines of code. But when we got rid of our current form, we just hid it. We just made it invisible. So it was still running in the background. And now if you think about form 2, we could be playing sounds. So a form could be hidden and yet still playing a sound in the background. So there's all kinds of potential stuff that you could do there. So that's why those kind of different lines of code exist, right? So now when I hit that exit button, it should shut everything down. Everything in the whole project should shut down. Not just one form or this form, but all the forms shut down, okay? All right. Now let's do a couple other simple buttons. Let's do, for example, hide player. Now, in order to do this, we need to know what the name of this player was. And it came up with a weird name by default. AX, Windows Media Player 1. What's the AX for? I don't know. Someone decided to name it that. But that's what it's going to be called. Should you maybe rename it? Sure, that might be a good idea to rename it. But I'm going to say let's just not bother with that. Let's leave it the way it is. And now let's code hide player. AX, Media Player 1. Dot visible equals false. Do that. You knew what was coming. This is code we did all the way back in unit 2 of this course. Okay, so it's really not that complicated. And I'm just going to copy that line, go to show player, paste it in, and switch it to true. This is nothing new. This is showing you that even code we learned way back in unit 2 could show up in some format in your final project, so that you could just hide the player, show the player, just the way you did with pictures all the way back with the hello and goodbye program. Okay, but now we're going to get into a little more of the complicated stuff. In order for us to actually test the code we're going to do, we actually need a video file and a sound file to work with. So I'm going to go online here and search for one. Sound file download. Now what types, here's the thing about video files and sound files. Just like when you work with pictures, there's lots of different formats, right? So here's a site that says you can download free sounds for things. So here's an arcade retro game over sound. And it looks like I can click this to download it. And here it's downloading down here, okay? And I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna maybe just put it on my desktop so it's easy to find. So there it is. I'm just gonna move it over to my desktop. Okay, there's a sound file. What about video files? A video file. How could I download a video file? That could be even more complicated, right? How do I download a video file? Well, here's one, supposedly, that I can download. It's a MPEG, right? So I'm going to download this sample MPEG here. It's a smaller version of one. Obviously, video files are getting even more. I don't want that. Okay, so there it is. I'm going to download that, and there's that one. And I'm going to put that one on my desktop. So there's one video file and one sound file that I can now test with my code now that we can get to the coding part, okay? Now, if you're doing this in a final project, you might have all these things and you could incorporate them right into your project folder and stuff like that. Things can definitely get more complicated, but at least that now I know I can get a download of it. Now, if you're wondering, can I play something like a YouTube video off the internet? That's different. That's playing something from the internet, not as opposed to downloading and playing a file specifically. Okay, but let's get to the coding now of play sound from file. All right, so I'm going to double click that button. Okay, and in theory, I would be able to get the code to play the sound file. But you need to think about files. How do files work? In order for a file to work, you have to think about how they work. Files have 3 names. This is something that maybe you've never thought of when you've worked with files before, because generally you don't tend to think of it this way. Files have a first name, okay? Files have a middle name, and they have a last name, okay? You may not have thought of this before, but I'm going to show you what I mean. This file right here, Mix Kit Arcade Retro Game Over, that's too long. I'm going to rename this file just sound. And if you think about it, that's what you might think is the name of this file, sound, but it's not. That's only its middle name. So its middle name, for example, is sound. Okay? Its last name would be .wav. That thing right there, the .wav, we tend to think of as just, why is that there? That's actually called the file's extension, okay? This is so that Microsoft Windows or Macintosh, so computers know what kind of file it is. They can identify it so that if you click on that file, it goes, oh, this is a sound file. I should open up a player to play sounds with. Oh, this is a picture file. So it knows what kind of file it is. We tend to focus on just the middle name. This is the part that we as users tend to key in. Like when you save your essay, you just call it essay. But you don't think that it's also putting on the like little extension to make it a Microsoft Word file or something like that. Now, what about the first name? What's the first name of this file? Like, what is that? Well, the first name, we tend to sometimes just call the path to that file. Like, how do I get to sound.wav? So I'm going to right click on this, go to properties, the properties of sound.wav. And it's this part that I'm talking about. It's the location where you can find that file. Now that we're into coding, you have to think about these details. A file has a specific location. Another word for this location, and by the way, what's nice about when you go to properties is you can actually copy and paste this. What's nice about that, oops, is you can actually copy and paste it in, okay? It's the path or the location of that file, okay? That's what I mean by how files work. Files have these 3 names, first, middle, and last name. Well, that's complicated, right? Like, how do I deal with that? Well, in order to deal with this, we're going to go back to our design and we're going to add something else from our toolbox. Something that I'm going to ask you guys to search for, okay? It's called the open file dialog. So if you just type in file like I did, or open file dialog, you should see this tool appear in there. And I want you to take it, put it on your design anywhere, because like a timer, it's just going to appear down here at the bottom. This is not something that actually appears on your design, but you're going to recognize this in a minute when we get it up in coding, okay? So again, how I did this is I went to the toolbox and I can either search for it or I can go down to all Windows forms and I can scroll down to open. So I'm going to go down to O, open file dialog. This tool gets added. It'll appear at the bottom. Don't bother naming it. Let's go back to our code for play sound. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use the open file dialog to choose a file. It will give us names. So we don't have to worry about it. It's going to do that for us. We're going to say open file dialog 1 dot show dialog. Let me zoom in on that, make that a little bigger for you guys. That's the one line of code you need. And I'll just show you what it does. It's not going to do it yet, but I'll just show you what it does. So 3 seconds. It makes this appear, which you will obviously recognize. This is something that you've seen in lots of programs. And now this is the code you can use to make that appear in your program. So now I can go to my desktop and I can select my sound file without having to worry about it necessarily dealing with the names. Okay? Now, for a fun option, I'm going to only filter in files that are wave files. In other words, they have that last name. Because I don't want to accidentally try to open up a picture file and try to play it like it's a sound. To do this, I can say open file dialog 1 dot, okay? So I'm getting, again, a little more complicated here. Dot filter equals a sound files. I'm going to put this character, that up arrow, which you might recognize as like the OR character, star.wav. The code to make only wave files appear. Okay, so I'm going to show you that dialog box again, and now you'll see it looks a little different. Well, not radically different, but now when I do this, it's only going to open sound files. Okay, notice there's no other option there. Only sound files will appear there. And again, I'm in control of this. I could say sound files, dude, right? Like in honor of, you know, the dad from Full House passing away yesterday. Anyways, so there you can see that's actually my code. That's not Microsoft Windows doing that. That's my code doing that. Okay. This makes the dialog appear. Already did. Okay. Now, the only 2 lines of code I need is I need to load the sound file into the player. So we use this dialog, okay, to make the dialog appear and choose a file. Now we're going to load that file into the player. So AX media player 1 dot URL equals. You might recognize this from web pages, but URL is actually older than web pages. It actually means Universal Resource Locator. It's just something that can locate a resource. And in this case, what I'm going to open file dialog 1 dot file name. The name that's in that dialog, whichever one they chose, it's going to get loaded into the player. And now finally, I'm going to play the sound. One more line of code, AX media player 1 dot controls, and this is a weird one, controls dot play. Okay, so that's the line of code. And I'm going to test this right now. So welcome to the Wax Media Player. Play sound from file, go to my desktop. Notice I don't see the video file on my desktop because it's filtered it out. But here's that sound file. And there it is. It just played the sound file. It worked. All right. With that done, we're now going to go and code the video file. Here's the good news. It's the exact same code. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I don't need all these comments this time. I only need these 4 lines of code. I'm going to get rid of the comments. It's the same 4 lines. Those are the only 4 lines that were in the sound player as well. What am I going to make different? Well, I'm going to filter it differently. I'm going to filter it for video files and not .wav, But let's take a look at the last name of the video file. It's an MP4 file. And I know there are other video files as well, but I'm going to use that one, MP4. Whoops. Okay. But the rest of it, I'm going to use the same code and change the filtering. That's what I'm doing. I'm using the exact same code and just changing the filtering a little bit. Let's see if that works. So I'm going to try to test this by playing that video file. There we go. Desktop, notice there's the MP4, it doesn't show the sound file anymore. And let's see if it works. There we go. It's playing a video. It's actually playing the video. Now, while it's doing this, I'm going to hide my player, switch over to play a sound. Notice the sound still plays, even though I don't see the player. I don't need to see it to hear a sound. Okay, final two buttons. Controls on and controls off. What I'm going to do here is hide the controls on the media player. I think you already knew that was what we were going to do, but I'm just going to add that comment in there. Okay, so here's how it works. AX media player 1 dot UI mode equals. And right here, I'm just going to put the word none in quotes. Okay, and I'm going to put a comment on here. UI is short for, some of you will probably guess, interface. We've been talking about that a little bit already. You've been doing this. So you can see now the way other people have written their code. If they're using the same vocabulary as you are, then the coding will become more intuitive for you to use. I'm also going to copy this line and I'm going to paste it into controls off. Whoops, that should have been controls off. None. And controls on is the word full. So full for when it's on, none for when it's off. Let's see if it works. I don't actually have to play a video for this, but I am going to play a video. I'm going to play a video from a file. This one. And while it's playing, I'm going to turn the controls off. There, they're gone. And I'm going to turn them back on. There they are. Controls off, controls on, show player, hide player. It's all there. Okay. So the media player is working. It's working the way we kind of designed it to work. Now, if you missed some of the code I showed for how to do this, then once again, if you go to examples and now you go to the second piece of code from example 1, you go here, okay? This is where it will show you that code, right? The code we just did. So you could literally copy and paste it over. Now, it doesn't have the comments in there yet. I will put them in there, but I don't want to waste your time right now and put those comments in there because we're almost out of time. I want to do one more quick thing before we wrap up today. I want to add a third form. Okay, so we did this yesterday. I'm going to add a form to my project. I'm going to call it Form 3. That works just fine. I don't need to name it anything fancy. Although I could, right? Like if you were making a game, you could make your forms called like level 1, level 2, or whatever, right? So now I have a third form. So if I looked at my Solution Explorer, there's now 3 forms here. Okay, not just one anymore, 3 of them. 3 separate forms. So all I'm going to do with this third form is I'm going to just keep it really simple. I'm just going to place on it a label saying goodbye, okay, and a timer so that it automatically turns itself off. So I've placed on this third form a label and a timer. Now I'm going to change some properties. Notice I'm going a little bit quicker because I assume that at this point you guys now kind of are getting the hang of this. Okay, for my form, I'm going to have it start in the center screen. I'm going to have the form border style, okay, of this form to be none again. So there's no border whatsoever. I'm going to set the background color. This time I'm not going to use code. All I'm going to do for the background color is make it black. For my label, I'm going to set the foreground color to be white. So it's a white foreground. I'm going to change the text to just say goodbye. And I'm going to change the font so it's a little bit bigger and prettier, right? But again, that's something that, you don't have to spend a ton of time doing or anything like that. But I'm going to just make this bigger and bolder. And then tighten it up. Okay. So a quick design on Form 3. And now I'm going to take my timer and I'm going to set it to be enabled. So it's on, running the whole time. And I'm going to set my interval for 2 seconds or 2000. So it runs for 2 seconds and then it shuts off. Actually, maybe I'll make it 5 seconds. I'll run for 5 seconds and then we're done. Okay. I'm going to code the timer. And all the timer is going to do is it's going to take that line of code from Form 2 to shut everything down. This line shuts down all forms. So I'm going to cut that line, not copy it. I'm going to cut it out of there. And I'm going to paste it into Form 3 instead, into the timer. So after 3 seconds, it shuts down all forms. Okay? I'm going to go back to Form 2. And now I'm going to switch to my last form. Remember how this works. Okay? This dot close will close the current form. But now what I can do is say Form 3 equals new Form 3. Form 3 dot show. This is the exact same code we did yesterday to switch from Form 1 to Form 2. Now I'm switching from Form 2 to Form 3. Let's see what happens. Now remember, this only happens when I hit the exit button. So now when I hit the exit button, it goes immediately to goodbye, waits for 5 seconds, and then shuts down all the forms. Okay? But we're going to do one more thing on Form 3, just for a kick in the, just for fun, for funzo. And this will be the last thing because we've only got a couple minutes left. So the last thing on Form 3 I'm going to do is I'm going to put some code into form load. So you remember form load? This is the code when the form first appears. Here's what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do with this code is I'm going to make, or I'm going to play a sound. Only code. So no media player. No media player on the design. So I'm not going to put a media player on my design. Could I write code to play a sound file without having to put that media player on there? So the answer is yes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a path, create a sound file, full name. Okay. So string, the first name equals string, the middle name equals string, the last name equals. This is me making variables that we've done before. Now I'm going to attach or concatenate, the fancy word, them together. In other words, put all the names together. So string name equals first plus middle plus last. When I say plus, it's not adding them like mathematically. It's like cat plus dog becomes cat dog. So where do I get this first name? Well, here's where you're going to get it from. I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this. There's a folder on my computer in the C drive under media where you can find media. What's weird about this is you have to put 2 slashes. Normally you just put 1, but when you're doing it in the code like this, you're going to have to put 2 slashes. Then the name, the middle name of this file is Windows exclamation. And the last name of this file is just .wav. So that's all 3 parts put together. I'm going to put an extra couple spaces in here so you can see them all lined up here. And again, since I'm recording this, you can always go back and watch this later. Okay, now sound player is using code. And I know I'm very close to the end of the time here, but here we go. System dot media dot sound player equals new. And then the rest of that line would be the same thing over again, bracket, bracket, semicolon. Okay, very much like random, random equals new random. Then I'm going to connect player to the sound file. So player dot sound location equals name, the name I created. And finally, I'm just going to play the file. Okay. More accurately, I'm going to make the player play the file. In sound file. Okay, player dot play. Okay, here it is, the final run, and then we'll be closing up for the day. Welcome to the media player. Exit. Look at that, it played the sound, even without the code. And it says goodbye. Just like I'm about to say goodbye to you guys for the day. How about that? It's almost like I timed it that way. All right, I'm going to turn off the recording now. That recording